Okay, welcome back. So in the last lesson, we looked at updating rows from a table using a function. Now, I said that when you're updating, and it's a lot of rows, millions or billions of rows, updating will stall the system, and it will only allow other people to use the system when the update is completed. To overcome that, we can actually use what are called cursors. Okay, and a cursor allows you to work with the rows a chunk at a time. So a cursor, simply you can think of it as a structure where instead of reading in a million of the rows or a billion of the rows, because think about it, if each row of your data is 5 or 10 bytes, and you have 10 billion of those rows, so 10 billion rows times 5 bytes, that's 50 billion bytes, which is about 50 megabytes. All right. Chances are you don't have 50 megabytes of RAM to read in all of those rows. Not possible. So by using a cursor allows you to sort of do it a piece at a time. So instead of reading in all 10 billion, you read in maybe half, and then you process that 500,000, and then you read in the other 500,000, and you keep going. Okay, so by using cursors, we allow the system to actually work more efficiently, and the good thing is it won't block. Okay, so when a cursor is running, other users can use the system. Okay, so keep in mind a cursor is just the ability to hold a portion of the data, work on it, and then reading another piece, work on that, and on and on and on until all the data, all the rows are read. Okay, so for each of the chunk of rows that is read, you're going to perform the same action on that chunk, each row in that chunk. Okay, so I'm going to create a function named portfolio, right? So imagine I retired and I say, you know what, let me cash out. I want to sell all my stock and I want to go retire and live the good life. But I want to find out what is the value of my stock. What is the amount of my portfolio? How much money do I have? And to do that, I simply need to find out how much stock I have, multiply by the price of those stocks, add them until give me the total. Right? So for example, let's say I was investing 5 years ago and I decided to, or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, I decided that, you know what, I'm going to buy Apple stock. There was a time when Apple stock was, I think, about $1 or something. Let's see here. Stock price, Apple. Okay. Right now it's $159 per stock. When Apple was about to go bankrupt so many years ago, the stocks were basically worth nothing, maybe 10 cents or whatever. So let's assume that I decided to buy those stocks at that time for maybe 10 cents, right? So now I said, okay, let me cash out. I'm going to sell them. So if I sell them, whoever buys them will have to buy them at the current price, which is $159. Okay, so I stand to make a profit. If I bought 1,000,000 shares, well, I'll make $159 million minus tax, of course, because they will charge you tax on what you earned. All right, so let's say hypothetically I have maybe 10,000 different types of stocks. Okay, 10,000 different companies I've invested in. And so let's say I don't have enough RAM, and so I cannot read in all 10,000 rows, so I want to do it a piece at a time. Okay, so we have to use a cursor. So let's do a bit of variable creation. So let's declare a variable named wealth, which will contain, and we're going to assume that everything is an integer. So this will contain my total assets, the value of my portfolio, how much I would make if I sold everything. Now, since we said that the cursor reads in a chunk, maybe 500 rows at a time, we need to store each row, okay? And so to do that, we will create a variable named row item of type record. So what happens when you read in the 500 rows in that cursor, you have to process each one of those rows, okay? And so we have to store each of those rows somewhere while we're processing it. And we do that by saving it into a record. This type allows me to hold a complete row, one row. Okay, now the important part, we need to create a cursor, okay? And it's of type cursor. And what this cursor will do, we have to tell this cursor, we have to tell the DBMS, what is this cursor? What is the purpose of this cursor? Well, the purpose is it will run this command. Okay, so select. Okay, this is the command that the cursor has to deal with. So select m.num shares, right, times the price of each share. But remember, price is in another table. Num shares is another table. So you have to join them. Let's call the result when I multiply how much shares I have times the price of each share as current value. Okay. From my stocks as M, right? No, as M. Okay. Inner join with stock price. That's the table that contains the prices. Okay. And then of course I'm going to join on symbol. Okay, so this cursor will run this query on the entire 10,000 rows. Okay. However, it's not going to run it all at the same time. It's going to run it on maybe 500 first. Okay, and then when it's finished, run it on another 500, and on and on and on. So this is the job of the cursor, to get whatever this query returns. Okay. All right. So the cursor is set, and so now we could actually begin the process. Okay. So we will say begin. The first thing we do is to open the cursor. All right. After we open the cursor, we will now loop through what was returned and what is in the cursor, what has been returned. So we're going to fetch the row, or rows, okay? So we will simply say fetch, okay? Now we're going to fetch, right, from my cursor, and we're going to place into row item. So remember, row item can only hold one record. So even if the cursor has 500 rows, I will have to loop through all 500. All right. So I open the cursor, and then I will start looping one by one. Okay. I see the first row. Okay. I'm gonna take it, save it into this record called row item, and now I'm gonna, well, before I'm just gonna say exit if no more rows. Okay. So if there are no more rows, I'll simply exit, okay, when not found. Okay, so this just says that if there are no more rows, then the cursor is finished. Okay, now once I keep having rows, then I will just take what is in that row, all right, and add it to my wealth variable. So I will say row item, and what am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for the current value. And so again, where did this current value come from? It came from right here. Okay, so remember, the cursor will perform this query. Whatever it gets back, that's going to be what I will iterate over. So the current value is simply num shares times price, and so I'm going to take that current value for that row and store it, add it to wealth. Okay, and then I'm going to keep doing that. If I have 500 rows, then I will add the 500. And once those 500 are finished, then the cursor will simply grab the other 500 and will keep going and going and going until all 10,000 are finished. So when we are done, when the loop is finished, right, we are assured that all the rows have been checked. And so I'll have to close the cursor. All right. And once I've closed the cursor, then I'll just return my answer. All right. And of course, if I have a begin, I must have an end. And that will be that. Okay. So a cursor allows me to work with the data a piece at a time, especially if I don't have a lot of memory to read in all the data. Okay. So I will have to get this into our database. So it's named assets. So let's make sure I don't have anyone. So let's drop function portfolio. If I already had it there, function portfolio. Okay. Yes. Okay. Good. So it means I can read in the new one. So assets.sql. All right. So line 15. Oh, I'm missing my semicolon. Okay. All right. Let's try that again. Let's try that again. Okay, great. So for me to check my assets, all I have to do is to say select. Okay. And the function name, portfolio. Okay. Oops. Spelling select wrong. Okay. So my portfolio is $1.9 million. So if I were to cash out, I would make $1.9 million, about $2 million. Okay. Again, this is just an exercise, but the whole point of it was to show you how cursors work. And the point of a cursor is to be able to work with the data a chunk at a time. All right. So again, we need to have somewhere to store each row while we're processing it. And then we have to tell the cursor what is the cursor going to do? What operation will the cursor perform? What kind of data will it get? Well, in our case, my cursor will get rows that have a current value. Okay, so it will only have one column. That one column, many rows, right? So each row will have this current value. And how do we get this current value? By doing this join. So the cursor will simply grab everything that matches up to this query from the table or whatever, or from whatever tables are needed. Okay, so once it gets this result, okay, it will allow me to process the result a row at a time. Okay, so for example, since this is only one column that will be returned, if it's one column but a billion rows, then the cursor will simply chunk it up, and it will each time let me work on that chunk. When that chunk is finished, it's going to read in the other chunk until I eventually exhaust all the rows. Okay, so notice I don't have to tell the cursor how to read in the chunks. It knows how to split up the billion rows. It knows what would be more efficient. Okay, all I have to do is tell it what I want, which columns I want. Okay, and then I can just process. Here is where we process every single row. And when I'm done, I close the cursor, end the loop, close the cursor, and I return my value. Okay, so that is our discussion on cursors. Once again, it's pretty much only useful when you have a lot of data and you don't want the system to block. You don't want other users to have to wait. So the cursor allows you to have that aspect as compared to update, whereby everything will stop and you have to wait till all your updates are finished. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this lesson on cursors. I will see you in the next lesson where we start looking at some other things such as group by, finding the average, and so on. All right, so we're pretty much winding down this bunch of lessons on databases.